Hi everybody, welcome to the second Marty McGuire Global Read Aloud video Q&A session. I'm Kate Messner and we're going to go ahead and get right to your questions because we had a whole lot of questions submitted on the blog this week. The first one comes from Mrs. McDaniel's second grade team at Northeast Elementary School in Ithaca, New York. And they ask, how do you pronounce Mrs. Alloy's name? Like that, Mrs. Alloy. Related question from Mrs. Stainer's second and third grade class in Federal Way, Washington. Did you ever have a special teacher like Mrs. Alloy or James Jackson growing up? I did. I had a lot of really great teachers. One of them was, in fact, my third grade teacher, Mrs. Fox. She had this thing in the back of her classroom called the sentence box. And if you finished your work early, you could go back and pick something out of the box. There might be anything in there, like a little plastic dinosaur or a pine cone, and write a sentence about it. I thought that was the best thing ever, and I wrote sentences all the time when I finished my work. Ms. Harrison's second grade at the University of Chicago Lab Schools says, on the cover of the book, Marty's crown is falling off into the pond, but you don't write that in the book. Why the difference? That is a great question. Here's how that happened. The cover of a book and the actual story don't always match up exactly perfectly, and here's the reason for that. When I finish writing a book, I send it to my editor at Scholastic, and Scholastic sends the book to the illustrator, Brian Floca. And Brian then gets to bring his own imagination to that story. So here, for example, is the cover of Marty McGuire. Now you'll notice this isn't actually the book. This is actually the original piece of artwork, the watercolor painting that Brian did for the book cover. My husband bought it for me as a birthday present a few years ago. But you will see, you're absolutely right. There's Marty with her crown, her tiara, and that was a touch that Brian added to the story, even though it might not have been right there in the text. I thought it was pretty great. But sometimes you'll notice things like that happen. All right. Mrs. Schmidt's third graders at St. Ignatius School in Yardley, Pennsylvania ask, why did you choose to make Marty and Annie have friendship problems? And a related question from Lynn Gosnell's class, did you have a friend like Annie who was your friend but left you for another group? Well, I didn't have a situation exactly like that, but the reason I chose that situation for this story is because I saw that happen to an awful lot of kids when I was teaching, and I know it's a pretty common situation in childhood, navigating all those friendships and trying to stay friends with your friends while you make new friends too. So I thought that would be something great for Marty to explore and have to figure out. Janet Darwish's grade 2 class in Ottawa, Ontario says they're loving the book, but why is Marty so interested in frogs? Well, that's a great question. I tend to make my characters interested in some of the same things I'm interested in, and I really like reptiles and amphibians. I mean, frogs are pretty cool, don't you think? Mrs. Arnold's second grade class from Ithaca, New York says they've been having great discussions about gender expectations while they read Marty McGuire. And they're wondering if I had a teacher like Mr. Miller who didn't let me do something because I was a girl, and how did that feel? You know, what a fantastic discussion to have. When we talk about gender expectations, that's a fancy way of saying that girls are only expected to do certain things, or boys are only expected to do certain things because they're a girl or because they're a boy. And I was lucky enough growing up to have teachers that encouraged me to be interested in whatever I was interested in, whether that was reptiles and amphibians or playing dress up. And I thought that was great. And I think that's important for us to remember, not only as teachers, but as kids and as friends too. You want to support people who are interested in whatever they're interested in. And that goes for girls who like to play with frogs as well as boys who might want to play dress up or try dancing. So I think that's a great conversation to be having. Mrs. Haynes' second grade class and Mrs. Talika's second grade class both asked, what is your best advice to help us become great writers like you? Well, first of all, thanks. Second, I have, I guess, two pieces of advice. The first thing is read and read and read, because reading makes you a better writer as well as a better reader. It gives you an ear for what really great sentences sound like and how stories work. And then the other piece of advice is just to write. I would recommend that anybody have a notebook, writer's notebook that you carry around, and when you have interesting ideas or you see something cool or hear something funny, scribble it down. And those are two things that I think can help make you a really great writer. Ms. Carlson's second and third grade class at Lewis and Clark Elementary School in Grand Forks, North Dakota asks, How did you come up with the idea for Sparky to be on top of the refrigerator with her paws in the cookies while throwing them at Mom? That was fantastic and really funny. We laughed really hard. Well, thanks. I'm glad. That idea actually came from something I saw on television. And the truth is, I was visiting my mom and dad when I was working on this book. And I was just carrying my suitcase up their stairs when I heard this awful noise behind me. It sounded like some horrible shrieking. And I turned around and I looked, and on their TV was a documentary about a wildlife rehabilitator who was trying to get this raccoon off of somebody's refrigerator. And the raccoon was making these horrible noises. And so that was actually the inspiration for Sparky. Mrs. Phillips' second graders at Garner Elementary in Clio, Michigan, I think it's Clio, Michigan, ask, do you have a lot of animals in your house growing up or now? We had dogs when I was growing up, and we had a cat named Tabitha for a while. But right now we actually don't have pets because almost everybody in my family is allergic to dogs and cats. My daughter had these pet rats for a little while, but she actually developed an allergy to them too. They were Dumbo rats with really big ears. They were very cute. Their names were Chester and Guy, but she was allergic to them, and so we had to find a new home for them. So we enjoy animals outdoors, but we can't have any in the house. Mrs. Donato's students in MPD and MCM would like to know, what was my favorite book as a child, and do I know any Australian authors? Well, I had a lot of favorite books as a kid. Some of them are actually on my bookshelf behind me still. I really liked Charlotte's Web. This was one of my favorites. And I loved Beverly Cleary's books, like the Ramona books. Those were favorites too. And do I know any Australian authors? No, not personally, but I would love to know about some of your favorite Australian authors, Mrs. Donato's class. And so if you want to, leave me a comment and tell me about some books I might want to read, I'd love that. Mrs. Muller's second graders at Tarver Elementary in Thornton, Colorado ask, do you like to dance? We want to know if you can waltz. We watched a YouTube video on waltzing and tried to do it as a class. It was funny and hard. I do like to dance, but I'm not great at it, and I don't think I could waltz. I might be able to figure it out if I watched a video like you, but the truth is I only took dancing lessons for a very short time when I was a kid, and I was the absolute worst student in the class. I was so clumsy, but I still enjoy dancing a lot. Pamela Kinsey's class at Coosa Elementary School in Beaufort, South Carolina, is wondering, do you have a favorite book that you have written, and do you think you will write a book about a third grade boy? Thanks. Well, asking an author what's your favorite book you've written is a little bit like asking a parent who's your favorite kid. So that's a hard question for me, but am I writing a book with a boy as the main character? I'm working on one right now, and it doesn't come out for a couple years, but it is a series with Scholastic, a chapter book series like Marty Maguire. And in that series, there is a time-traveling search and rescue dog. And in the very first book, that dog goes back in time to the Oregon Trail and meets a boy who he has to help through some really scary situations. So that's been a really fun book to work on. And there's your book with a boy main character. Mrs. Cooper's third grade from Wasaben Junior School in, will I get this name right? Wikwemikong, Ontario. Tell me if that's right. Asks, were you ever in a school play? And if so, did you want to play the part you were assigned? I was in a school play when I was in middle school. The name of the play was Bye Bye Birdie. And I don't remember the name of the character that I was actually assigned. It wasn't one of the main characters. It was one of the main character's friends. But yeah, I was pretty happy with that part. Mrs. Farnsworth, third grade class in West Valley, Utah asks, did you make books when you were little? Like us? I did. I used to love writing stories right from the time I could hold a pencil. And so my very first book was actually called Shark, Terror of the Sea. And I remember writing it, and I made a cover for it out of construction paper, and my mom put it on the refrigerator. I don't have that anymore. I really wish I still did. I do still have my journal that I kept when I was in middle school. And this is full of just really, everything I was worried about and thinking about in middle school. I'm really glad I still have this. So those stories that you guys are writing now, keep them. Don't ever throw them away because you'll want them later. Mrs. Postian's students from Wisconsin Lutheran School ask, why did you want Marty to have a real frog in the play? Well, the truth is I did that because I thought it would really liven things up and be pretty funny. I hope it worked out that way. The American School of Milan third grade explorers want to know, Marty is quite a character and we have been studying character traits. How do you plan for such a character? That is a fantastic question. And the answer is I do a lot of writing in my writer's notebook about a character before I ever start writing the book. I do a lot of writing in that character's voice, and I try to imagine what a day in that character's life would be like. What time does she get up in the morning? What does she want to wear? What does her closet look like? What does her room look like? What's hidden under her bed? All of those things. So I do lots and lots of writing about each character, and then once I know the character, I can begin to predict how she or he might react in certain situations, and then I can start working on the story. Great question. Nicole Friel's grade 3 class from Milk River, Alberta, Canada, says, we love Marty McGuire and we're interested in the character of Veronica Grace. Do you think she has a weakness? And why do you think she acts the way she does? Well, I think we all have weaknesses as people. And one of our weaknesses, I think, is being able to understand how people could be totally different from us and like totally different things. And that's really what's going on with Veronica, Grace, and Marty, if you take a look at it. I will be interested to hear how you guys feel about this issue after you finish the book. So maybe you can stop back and let me know that in a comment later on. Mrs. Rosenquist, second graders at Norwood Elementary School in Port Jefferson Station, New York, say, in Chapter 6, you wrote that you can tell the difference between a boy and a girl frog by the size of their eardrum. Is that a true fact? Yeah, it is. That's kind of cool, isn't it? A female bullfrog, if you look, has an eardrum that's about the size of their eye. And in a male bullfrog, the eardrum is much bigger. So that's how you can tell the difference. I love little details like that. And anytime I can work them into my books, I try to. So those are our questions for this week. Thank you very much for the great questions. If you would like to ask a question for next week's video Q&A, please leave a comment on this blog post, not the other ones, because I won't be able to find it. And I'll be back next week with another Marty McGuire Global Read Aloud video Q&A session. Happy reading.